And Philip, the latest deaths reported in the town of Ongban. Can you tell us more about what happened?
Yes, the funeral services in the town have actually sort of confirmed those numbers. They've had the bodies brought in. There were protesters back out on the streets in this town. It's not a particularly major one. In fact, a lot of the protests now are sort of taking place in some smaller towns and cities across the country. But the security forces, we're hearing reports, open fire, and we have these 8 deaths. There's another casualty reported in another upcountry town. But the protests are partly on the streets in the form that you've been seeing, and where the security forces have been going in and trying to crack down hard. But also, very importantly, they are these strikes. There's the civil disobedience movement, and that's where the strength of the opposition is at the moment. It's hitting the economy, it's hitting the workings of the government, and that to them is as important really as keeping the numbers on the streets. And we are seeing a fewer demonstrators in some of the major cities because the crackdown has been so ruthless.
And we're hearing that more and more people are trying to cross the border into Thailand. Is Bangkok prepared for an exodus?
Yeah, the Thai government has had its sort of military officers up there at the border. There's a long border between the two countries, and they've been preparing camps for a potential arrival of thousands, tens of thousands of refugees. This is an area that has had large refugee camps going back to 1988, when people fled a brutal crackdown on the previous uprising. And the border area on the Myanmar side is controlled by an ethnic group, the Karen National Union, who are long-standing foes of the Myanmar military. And they say that they have got a lot of people coming into their area who are opposition politicians, doctors involved in the civil disobedience movement, and people who have been who have fled from Myanmar military control. They're not really flooding across the border at this stage, but the Thais are making their preparations, and certainly we've seen that happen in the past.
Now, these protests have been made possible by the protesters' ability to share information online. The military is trying to crack down once again on that, aren't they?
They are. Now, every night for several weeks, they have switched off all of the internet overnight. And that has often been when they're going in, staging raids, arresting protest organisers, and also to try and stop the protesters organising for the next day. But increasingly now, every day, they're also switching off mobile data. So really, the only access people have to internet is in a fixed point in their homes. No one's really in their offices. And this is again to try and stop the organisation of these protests. Also worth noting, the media has been crippled. Virtually all independent media has either been banned or has just found it impossible to operate. And the last independent daily newspaper stopped publishing this week. So the military is definitely sort of using the control of these measures to isolate the country and to try and repress these protests. But in terms of the organisation of the civil disobedience movement, that's in full swing still.
Philip, thank you very much. Philip Sherwell there